for the left to mount a full frontal attack and try to reimpose the Fairness Doctrine the way it once stood on the books. I think what they're probably likely to do is go through the back door, use things like localism mandates, community oversight boards, various other types of media oversight regulations, public interest requirements. All of these things in toto, if you add them up, amount to something like the Fairness Doctrine when you get right down to it, and yet it doesn't go by that same name or under the same banner. So that's, I think, the way they'll probably pursue it, because it just doesn't give the right the red meat that'll get the sort of awaken the beast to oppose it.
Yeah. Stay with us here, and we'll come back and talk off-air a bit. Adam Thierer, again, he is a senior fellow with the Progress and Freedom Foundation. On the web, they are at pff.org, Progress and Freedom Foundation. And the book is called A Manifesto for Media Freedom. It is published by Encounter Books. More to come on The Bohannon Show at Westwood One. Hi there, good evening, and welcome to the Jimbo Hannon Show from Westwood One Radio. We're at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. On the web, you'll find us at jimbotalk.net. Well, we have a new Congress coming up, and of course already there are discussions looking ahead to the midterm congressional and gubernatorial elections of 2010. We're going to be talking about a variety of aspects of that tonight. First of all, if you have not been following the news headlines of the evening, the chance for the Democrats to have a filibuster-proof Senate have gone down the drain, at least assuming straight party line votes, because that would require 60 senators, and the Georgia runoff now has given the incumbent Republican Saxby Chambliss a victory tonight, fairly substantially, about 60 to 40% in a runoff with Democrat Jim Martin. So even if Al Franken manages to take the seat that is now in recount from Norm Coleman in Minnesota, the best that the Democrats could have would be 59 seats. But again, that's only an argument that applies to straight party line votes. In point of fact, on some issues, there would probably be a filibuster-proof Senate. Anyway, we're going to lead off our discussion tonight with another change that is coming up. As 2010, of course, looms, we have now suddenly word that an incumbent, and one who had until recent times been, I guess, a pretty solidly entrenched incumbent, Mel Martinez, the Republican senator from Florida, will not be seeking a second term. And we're joined now by Westwood One Metro Network's reporter Rory O'Neill, who is based in Florida. For more on that, do we know why Senator Martinez is doing this?
Well, the senator, first, good evening, Jim. The senator says he's doing it to spend more time with family and friends back here in Florida, and he says it wasn't the political tea leaves that made him make that decision, but of course the latest polls show he had about a 35% approval rating, so any re-election campaign would have been a tough one.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly the Democrats are feeling their oats and looking for any vulnerable incumbent anywhere, and the fact is that the things have not looked good for him, and he has been, of course, closely linked to the Bush administration. He was a cabinet member, for Pete's sake.
Right, the former HUD secretary. He was also head of the RNC. Because he's an immigrant from Cuba, came over here from Cuba as a teen. He was a very high-profile figure because of his Hispanic draw, but really still was not incredibly popular here. Also, I should note that really the code for spending time with family, most of us around here understand that it's a chance for the senator to go make money. Before this, he was mayor of the county of Orange County, Florida, where Orlando is, and so he really hasn't been collecting that big paycheck for a number of years. So we think that this will probably get him on some nice-paying law firm consulting circuit and be able to put away some retirement funds.
$162,500 a year sounds pretty good to most of us, but let's face it, for a person in a senator's position, almost all of them could go out into the private sector somewhere and make considerably more money. And there's no question about the fact that with that $162,500 and a certain amount of expenses covered, you've got a lot of expenses you incur. So there aren't very many people who are in Congress who are getting filthy rich off of being there, unless they're doing a few other things on the side as well.
And he's 62 years old. His term will expire in 2 years, and then it's 6 years after that. So he'd be 70 years old, and then looking at that same savings account. So I think that was part of that. At least was a factor in making his decision.
Yeah. Are we hearing any familiar names being bandied about to possibly replace him? I'm told that the name Jeb Bush has come up.
Well, Jim, the only name not on the list is mine. It's pretty much any political figure with a statewide name recognition from either party is on the short list, which is not short at all. On the Democratic side, though, it must be led by Alex Sink, a woman who is our CFO, the state treasurer. And then on the Republican side, the list is a long one and filled with a lot of very ambitious people. And yes, Jeb Bush has been put on that list as someone who could easily raise the $10 million or so necessary to mount a statewide campaign.
State Attorney General Bill McCollum,
who has run for several statewide offices, repeatedly former member of Congress. So he's on the list. I could keep on going. The mayor of Miami, the mayor of Orange County, Florida, the Congressman John Micah. Everyone has an eye on an open Senate seat.
I note the name Connie Mack is being mentioned. Is that the son of the former senator?
It is indeed, yes. He also has followed his father's footsteps in the political arena. So, yes, Connie Mack Jr., or I think he would be the fourth. But, yeah, Connie Mack the fourth, I think, is also said to be considering a run. And, it really, these things, it all comes down to whether or not they think they can get the 10 or 15 million in order to mount the race.
Exactly, and it is such a terribly expensive proposition these days. There's no question about that. This would be the second open seat of the 2010 cycle, as Kansas Republican Sam Brownback is expected to leave the chamber to run for governor. And this is interesting because of all the years in which the Republicans had been the majority party. They still have a total of 19 seats to defend in 2010 as compared to 16 for the Democrats. So while we tend to think of the first year of a new administration in power as being a year when that party loses power, and therefore that the Republicans should make gains, but when you've got more to defend, you've got more to lose.
Right, and especially with these open seats, and you don't know how they've gone for their governor's races either, and plus, you don't know how this economic downturn we're going through now, how we'll be feeling in November of 2010, and whether it's still that same throw-the-bums-out kind of mentality.
I'm curious about the status of Virginia, of Florida and Virginia, actually, I was going to mention in the same breath, which is the fact they are solidly red states except recently. And you have to wonder, are we talking here about some of the circumstances of the moment, an unpopular president, an unpopular war, coupled with an economic downturn, or are we talking about a serious and, at least for the moment, permanent change away from the solid red state status that some of these states enjoyed? You know Florida fairly well. Are we seeing a bluing of Florida, a more purplish haze?
Well, it has to be because of the migration of the population. I know you know Florida well, and you look at that Central Florida corridor. They call it the I-4 corridor, the highway that runs from Tampa through Orlando and up to Daytona Beach. That center part of the state has very few people that you would call native sons. Me being among them. Because there are so many quote-unquote foreigners or out-of-staters who relocate here, they bring different political views, so it is tough for Florida to keep its bright red status with so many New Yorkers or people or New Englanders coming down to live here for their retirement years.
There actually, I guess, are entire portions of Florida that could be considered Little New York, or even more specific, Little Bensonhurst, or little segments of Boston or Philadelphia or what have you, that almost entire neighborhoods, as people move and you get a critical mass of folks from a certain area, and the winters start to catch up with the aging boomers or people older than that back in say the snow belt, where people say, well, if we're going to move to Florida, let's move down to the west side of Orlando, where all of our friends seem to be. I mean, there's been, I guess, a wholesale transfer of some neighborhoods south, haven't there?
Well, absolutely. And I'm from Rhode Island originally, and we know that all the Red Sox fans, they head to the Fort Myers area to go watch the Red Sox in spring training. So they'll relocate. When they move down, that's where they'll move to, is around their favorite spring training teams. I mean, it sounds silly, but that's the way people decide to pick what part of Florida they're going to live in. And once you got two friends there, well, maybe the next person will join them. But there's also another interesting fact is that so many people from Puerto Rico are moving into Central Florida. Kissimmee, the area right around Disney World, has got a booming Puerto Rican population. So I shouldn't suggest that all the migration comes from the Northeast to Florida. There is also a big population that's coming up from Puerto Rico as well. And they vote squarely Democratic compared to the Cuban Hispanic population, which is squarely Republican. So it's an interesting divide in the Hispanic community as to what part of the state you're in.
All right. In terms of the people from the snow belt in this country, have they tended to be more Democratic or more Republican?
Well, I would largely say that if you get the Northeast people moving down, then there'll definitely be a more Democratic tilt to it. I mean, look at Palm Beach County, for instance, has got a huge New York population in there, and that's what makes the transfer down.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, in California, which was the giant growth state for so many years, the bloom has been off the rose and population growth has slowed down considerably there. I'm wondering, has Florida reached a saturation point in population growth?
It certainly has slowed down. Obviously, we have the third highest foreclosure rate in the nation here, so it's not all things are rosy. One of the things that you're noticing, though, is that people are actually opting for other retirement places. North Carolina now has become a very hot retirement spot. More favorable tax structure, property taxes in particular. A lot of people don't want to deal with the Florida hurricanes and the property taxes and insurance rates, namely, that go along with that. So, as a retirement destination, Florida may be losing a bit of the bloom off the rose, but the state, of course, is trying to lure a younger generation, like me, to relocate to the state, to bring working families here, not just the early bird lunch special crowd.
All right. Well, Rory, thanks very much. As always, you do great work for us, and we appreciate you taking time out for us tonight.
My pleasure, Jim. Good talking to you.
Rory O'Neill right there, Westwood One Metro Network's reporter on the rather surprised decision of the state's Republican freshman Senator Mel Martinez not to run for re-election come 2010. And, of course, that has brought about a considerable scramble. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about that big Republican victory in Georgia tonight, the still unresolved Senate race in Minnesota, and other issues of this new Congress with Lou Jacobson from Congress Now. 1-866-50-JIMBO is our number. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Jimbo Hannon Show. We're at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626, and looking ahead to this new Congress, and in particular the notion of a filibuster-proof Senate. Lou Jacobson is with us now. He is the editor of Congress Now, which is on the web at congressnow.gallerywatch.com. Mr. Jacobson, good to have you with us tonight.
Hi, thank you, Jim.
Now, I'm curious a little bit about just exactly how filibuster-proof the Senate is now that we have the Saxby-Chambliss Republican re-election in Georgia over Jim Martin, and by a fairly substantial amount in the election this evening. Certainly, if it's a party line vote, then yeah, you have a maximum of 59 Senate Democrats, right?
Sure, and there's a certainly pretty good chance there'll be 58 if the Al Franken Norm Coleman race ends in Coleman's favor. The filibuster number of 60 is probably a little bit less solid than at first glance, because so many times a bill comes up, you'll have folks in the GOP siding with Democrats or vice versa. So the key for a Senate leader is to keep all their members in line, but there's really no guarantee they can do that, particularly when you have regional differences, say Northeastern senators or Southern Democrats, who really don't always side actually with their party. So 60 would have been a very good number for the Democrats if they want to sort of increase their chances of breaking a GOP filibuster, but it's no guarantee. So for that reason, this contest, while certainly a very big success for the GOP tonight in Georgia, It doesn't necessarily make or break either party's strategy. Every bill which comes up is going to be on a case-by-case basis, and there's going to be a lot of jockeying and a lot of arm twisting to get one senator to switch sides on a particular bill because it just fits their constituents' needs better.
Mm-hmm. As I understand it now, we have a very slim lead for Al Franken to be reported in Minnesota. Is that correct?
It is slimmer even than it was at the start of the day. Franken gained, I believe, is in the range of 30-odd seats. 30-odd votes, I should say, today, because there is a batch of votes that have been sort of forgotten about in one county there, and he gained some seats out of that. The current numbers, last I checked, were right around 300, and he is certainly facing a steep obstacle if you think about the fact that he was behind. When the counting started, he is still currently behind. But a lot of the burden now rests on these votes which were not counted, which are basically absentee ballots, which have some problem with them, and there are a couple thousand of these. And also the other category of votes, too, are votes that have been challenged by either the Coleman camp or the Franken camp. Those two categories of votes are probably going to be much wider than the total number of votes separating these two candidates, so it's still far from over at this point.
I was going to say, now, given the closeness of this, it's clear that every side will use every single available tool, every recourse, every appeal that is possible. Under that assumption, a very safe assumption, then exactly how long is this going to take? I mean, the new Congress is supposed to convene in about a month now.
Right. I mean, I'm sure, well, I'm not sure, but I would think that they will be able to work this out, if not by the very first day Congress is in, then pretty soon after that. A lot of it depends on if they go to the courts, how quickly the courts act on this. As far as the standard procedures go, it is supposed to finish up within the next about 10, 12, 15 days. But if there are court challenges over exactly what ballot should be counted, which one shouldn't be, what the standards for counting are, that sort of thing, it could be taken to court, appealed, and there's really no way of knowing at this point how long that could take. Then, of course, there's the question of the Senate itself. It is the ultimate arbiter of who can sit in the chamber. So, in theory, a Democratic majority could basically overrule the court and say, seat Franken instead of Coleman. That would be, I think, very dangerous politically for the Democrats, particularly given that they've gained, several seats in the current election, 2008, and they gained seats in 2006 and are now at 58 seats. I think it would kind of look like piling on if they were to sort of overrule what seems to be a fairly clear victory for Coleman, if that's what happens. So I think that you will probably, in the end, see some complaints by Democrats, frustrations expressed, but I think that ultimately they will go with whatever the courts in the state choose.
Yeah, although it seems pretty clear as well that there will not be a clear winner. I mean, whoever wins this, it's going to be tainted in the eyes of his opponents. Right. It'll be an unclear victory. Something that I've always been curious about, and goodness knows I've covered enough elections, but I've never actually been on the counting process. But it's remarkable how the count can so vary from one time to the next, and it doesn't seem to be just disputed ballots. Right.
Well, actually, in the case today of these discovered ballots, it had to do with the fact that, like, a ballot counting machine, it actually malfunctioned, and they put all the ballots aside after it stopped. The counting stopped, and they set it aside in a sealed box, and then just sort of forgot about it. And then when they added those back in, I believe from the reports that I've seen, the total number of ballots actually exceeded the number of people who had signed in at that polling place. So it's still unclear, if there were double-counted ballots there, and it's very, very hard to figure this out after the fact.
Yeah, I know that both parties get to monitor this thing, and you do the best you can, but of course, it's not just like we all have paper ballots now with a little X that you can count.
Right. Well, actually,